Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we're returning to the subject of Terramaster NAS, and we're looking at the new big software update currently in beta, TOS 6.0. Terramaster listed, I think early last week or even late last week, that they had enabled public access to the beta for TOS 6. This is their big software overhaul, the latest variation of their system software, supporting a lot of the more modern releases in their hardware architecture there. And throughout the course of this video, I'm going to be going through each of the improvements that I was able to find, some of which are listed by Terramaster themselves, and other ones, a couple of them, I haven't even found listed on their own detailed breakdowns of what TOS 6 includes. Just a quick disclaimer though out the gate, it's worth highlighting that if you are currently running a Terramaster NAS and this video is the first time you're hearing about the TOS 6 beta and you're thinking, do you know what, I'm going to have a go on that, please bear in mind this is a beta. And I will say, even in my brief time sort of going through a lot of the details of it, I will say that it is by no means the most stable software I have used. This is a beta and they are being very clear about it. So if you're going to go down this road, I would recommend one, having an up to the second backup in place at all times, or run this with a separate set of drives entirely. Do not let TOS 6 currently in beta form be your primary OS for your NAS. All the means to download it are available, linked in the description below, and again they've provided their own detailed instruction on how to upgrade from 5 to 6. If you're going to upgrade from TOS 4 to 6, there's actually quite a lot to do, but that's enough disclaimers. Let's crack straight on, because they have made some pretty nice changes, for some good, some for bad for some users. In terms of the GUI, you can ignore this here. This is the system having a new auto lockout feature, where if you leave it unattended for a certain period of time, it will go into an auto lock. Again, not unusual, we've seen that before with NAS brands, but it's quite nice that you've got a little bit more tailoring with that auto lockout, something that wasn't as intuitive, I would argue, or at least not as accessible in previous versions of TOS as it is now. One of the earliest improvements that Terramaster were keen to highlight in TOS 6 is an upgrade to the Linux kernel that the web browser runs on there, and indeed the system services and tools. Upgraded to LTS 6.1, the Linux kernel is actually a markedly degree newer than the one found in the likes of, say, QNAP, currently running on Linux kernel 5.10, and Synology's platform running somewhere around 4.4, I believe. Don't get me wrong, this is still not the most up-to-date kernel, and very rarely do you see a lot of system software running on the newest Linux kernel, but with improvements there in the background with regards to browser and performance, and of course performs in BTRFS as detailed here on the Linux distributed database there's lots of little improvements that have been rolled in with that Linux kernel upgrade that Terramaster hopes to utilize in TOS 6. And this definitely leads to a lot more responsiveness from the GUI in terms of navigating options, navigating some of the individual options here at the top, and ultimately just a number of things that the system is able to manage at any given time and still remain responsive. I'm not exactly using the most up-to-date NAS here. If we go into my hardware and power, or moreover go into the overview, you'll know that I'm not utilizing an especially new NAS. This is from around about 2 years ago, the F4-424 here, running on a quad-core Intel Celeron, and that's a J3000 series processor at that, and 4 gig of memory is still better than nothing. But again, we're seeing kind of an increased memory usage than I'd like to see, but nothing too outlandishly bad, and it is still in beta, so optimization is something we might hold off a lot of. This isn't a full review, or hold off a lot of the judgment on that. Another very early difference many of you that have used Terramaster's NAS devices will have already noticed is definitely an overhaul in the GUI. Now, whether this is going to be completely to everyone's liking, I'm not completely convinced. I'll go over the things I like first. I like the navigation option built here into the side of the screen, giving ourselves a nice live dashboard to find out more information, and we can add multiple widgets to this as needed. You can navigate and add extra ones if you choose, and on top of that, this side option is just readily available straight out the gate for whenever you need it, and you can manage it quite nicely. Now, on top of that, you've got options for the notifications. Again, you can bring that out, get rid of it when needed, and finally, if you do have alerts or buzzing coming from the system to warn you about some of the hardware faults, you can navigate them directly from the GUI here. Normally something you don't quite see with a lot of NAS systems, where you have to manually go into the settings option, go into the hardware and then find out what exactly that notification buzzer is to disable it, or at least act upon its warning. So I like these sort of improvements. Also, this centralized command deck at the top, I'm not against it. It feels like it's trying to be both Mac and Windows 11 simultaneously, and I'm not convinced by it. I would rather prefer the old style of the menu, but I do appreciate the attempt here to change things up. For example, the most recent apps and services you've been utilizing are accessible here. I would have liked to have had just an all apps button, and of course we can go to all applications there at the bottom to get access to them there. But I appreciate the effort, even if it's not quite targeted towards me. And of course, here at the top, we can find out more information about our user account, apply some of the two-factor authentication, whether it is you're going to use their own tool or a third party. Changing some of the customization in the appearance of the wallpaper hasn't really changed too much. And that's really it. I mean, there at the top, I'm not anti this, I'm just not sure I completely like this bar at the top. And I feel like if they're going to go full Windows 11, which is what I think this is stylized on, they would have gone for the bottom bar. I'm not sure I like it, but I appreciate the effort. My criticisms of that bar aside, I do like the new opening animations that are built in here. They do feel quite localized and responsive there. Also, when we're going through a lot of these, I am feeling like it has improved in its responsiveness. The placement of the icons themselves between TOS 5 and 6 hasn't changed a great deal. There have been improvements in terms of the storage. So the way drives are managed, where the OS lives, and when you want to delete an existing storage area, what happens, have all seen quite a lot of improvements. Such as now the option to wipe disks directly. So for example, if you in the past, when you were removing a storage pool and removing drives from that pool, you didn't necessarily know that the data inside those disks was going to be wiped. You just thought maybe it was dismounting it, or in some cases it would just dismount it and kill the index. At least now you have the option, for example, to completely wipe a disk prior to removing the drive completely. And on top of that, you've also got, and I believe this was in TOS 5 as well, the option to secure erase a drive as well. So those are some nice options for long-term data deletion I think a lot of users are probably going to like. And although I can't really show it to you here because the OS has already been pre-installed on a NAS I upgraded, apparently you do have the option now to choose specifically which drives you want to utilize for the OS. So normally during setup you don't really have a choice on which drive your operating system is going to live on compared with other storage drives. Now during the installation you can actually pre-select which drive the OS is going to live on, be it across multiple drives or just the one. Carrying on the subject of storage, another improvement that might be worth talking about is in the file manager. Now, some of these, again, did arrive in the tail end of TOS 5.1, but also into TOS 5. The TOS 6, I should say in TOS 6, I quite like this new tab ability here. So, for example, if you're copying and pasting between windows, normally on a NAS it can be problematic with only a single file window. When you compare that to something like Windows, when, for example, you might have multiple folders that you want to utilize, and you've got the option, of course, within Windows, for example, to create multiple windows to travel between. And although that's not impossible in TOS 5 and NAS platforms in general, it's actually a bit clunky. Whereas now, taking very much a leaf out of the book of Windows 11, we can now create multiple tabs. So, for example, if I wanted to move things from my photo album here, we could go into another folder here that would be, for example, my desktop or some of my shares or favorites here that make my way through the whole system. I can choose to have these 3 tabs open to flick between as I need them. So it's quite nice to have that multiple option of going through different tabs and folders as needed to copy data between if I chose to and move it in as needed. There's also been improvement in thumbnail generation there in the background, even given the option to completely disable the use of thumbnails if you choose to have them displayed, which can slow down the system. Not everyone's going to use it. I think most people would just like a more responsive indexing of thumbnails, but at least having the option to disable it, particularly for larger databases, will make a lot of sense. Talking of secure data and what's most important, of course, on the left-hand side, you've now got SafeBox. SafeBox allows you to create an encrypted storage area where you can put data where you want to make sure it is completely key locked there. So if you wish, you can create this brand new key locked area here. Let's give this a key locked password there. And this will allow us to create a safety deposit box that can only be accessed with this key. This key can be downloaded apparently as well, and there's quite a lot you can play around with here. I quite like the idea of the safe box. Now, although it's existed for quite a while, we do need to talk just a little bit there about Terrasync. Terrasync is their equivalent of Synology Drive or QNAP's QSync, and this allows you to synchronize team folders across multiple systems utilizing mobile devices and, they say, a Windows component, but no matter how hard I look, I can't seem to find the desktop application, and I'm not alone in that when you go through the Terramaster forums. But Terrasync, nevertheless, is still a decent little application and service to synchronize across different client devices, and that extends, by the way, all the way through to utilize the new upgraded TNAS app. It's traditionally the app that's utilized for finding the NAS on a local area network. It's now been extended towards the use of synchronization with Terrasync there. So for example, when we use the application and service there with creating that Terrasync task, we can synchronize between these Terrasync servers using that tool. But how much of this is going to be utilized for local access? That's up for debate, because right now I'd still rather have a nice, easy to use local synchronized client tool on my Windows machine. Again, not too different to that of, say, Synology Drive and QSync here on my local PC. Of course, you're always going to have map network drives, sure, but it would have just been nice to have that local desktop tool readily accessible rather than utilizing Terrasync here on the web browser or trying to utilize it here via these apps and tools. Again, not terrible. I'm just kind of surprised it's done this way. Indeed, using that new TNAS PC app that's been updated, you can go in and log your way into the network attached storage device without using a web browser at all and start playing around with some of those ready available settings without going into the web browser. Again, whether that is to utilize easy access and connection with map network drives, that's great, but still nonetheless I would have liked to have seen a lot of these control options, and particularly the Terrasync option, to be that pinned client tool there. Next up, you've got the support of the injection of data drive. Now, what does that mean in real terms? Well, normally when you've got data inside a NAS, it is formatted to the NAS's own file system, and also a lot of the time if you take a drive from another system, you won't be able to see the contents of it because it needs to be presented in the same format as that NAS. Now, in the case of TOS 6.0, they're now supporting direct mounting of data drives. So if the data on the drive is in these file systems here, you're able to mount them directly and just inject them into one of the available bays, and you will be able to mount that drive just like you would the likes of a USB drive. Now, this is almost certainly not going to be foolproof. I don't think it is going to be a case of chucking in a NAS drive from another NAS system, because that will be locked in on their own proprietary layout. But nonetheless, at least this does mean that you're not going to need to impose partitions on the Terramaster's own NAS side before you view the content of those drives, or at least interact with them. Once you've injected this third-party drive into the system, you simply need to go to the list of available drives. Then from there, select the new drive you've installed, and on the top three dots here, there will be an option to mount the disk here, and that will mount the drive as an independent storage area away from the rest of the system there. And finally, closing out the subject of storage, we can talk real quickly about the fact that you can now bolt on cloud storage. Go to the remote folder option here, and once that's done, you can go ahead and bolt on a cloud drive there. That's right, go ahead, select your cloud service provider, in my case Google Drive, give it a name. Stop typing it wrong, Rob. Click next. From there, it will ask you to put in your login credentials for that Google Drive. And once you've done it, it will allow you to bolt on this area of cloud storage. We'll use our disposable NAS Compares account there. That'll go ahead. We agree to bolt that on there. And then on the Terramaster NAS, it will now mount that cloud storage. Not as a synced drive. This is going to be a usable degree of storage by the Terramaster system. Of course, you're going to be reflected. It's going to be reflected by your own internet connection speeds and the pathways and permissions you've given to remote internet connectivity on your Terramaster NAS. Seems to be hanging there. We're just going to leave that there in the background. Fingers crossed it will work. Try as I might, I don't think I'm getting any success with this feature. But again, we're going to have to chalk that up to the beta. So perhaps that's something that needs just a wee bit more work there. But if they do get that working, that is still going to be quite nice to have a cloud storage synchronized drive there for use with some of the services in the Terramaster NAS ecosystem. It's also worth highlighting when that feature is enabled. If you go into the file manager and just go ahead and click the plus button there, you're able to mount several different kinds of remote access drive, including that of that cloud drive feature. I just wish it worked for me on this occasion. Now, TOS 6 also boosts a few little security improvements. If we make our way into the security tab there, on a lot of the original beta pages, they do talk about improvements in advanced ACL controls that have been brought in. But alongside what I argue was one of the most impressive features of TOS 5 and 5.1, i.e. isolation mode, the one-click option that allowed you to kill off all remote access, all third-party PHP connections and more. They've now also rolled in a new mode called SPC, or Security and Privacy Control. And this allows not only the same level of control that Security Isolation mode gave you, but also a degree of customization. This allows you, for example, with all of the installed applications and services, completely 100% kill network services, whether they can have it or not, and the same goes for storage services. So you can do that ad hoc or permanently for certain apps and services that you want to make sure have got a lessened degree of access or indeed control, or at least opening the door to vulnerabilities being utilized and lowering those attack vectors by use of that. And of course then you've got the fail-safe switch that is of course security isolation mode there. Other than that, when it comes to the control panel, a lot more of the other improvements are either back-end or kind of quality of life improvements, things that, you know, other NAS brands have been offering and now they've kind of, you know, caught up and caught on. For example, finding out more about health information of disks inside the system, you can actually find out a lot more information than you were previously able to, as well as performing benchmarks within the system there. On top of that, with that third-party drive integration there, when utilizing data disks, you've now also got support of cross-platform mounting. So if you had disks that were in an ARM-based Terramaster NAS, you can now mount them inside one of the x86 systems like the one we're utilizing today. There's now a text editor included for when you want to go through some of the back-end files here, or if you're just trying to open up standard README type docs, you can now utilize that alongside a text editor inside the GUI of Terramaster rather than downloading it locally to your local system in order to open it. Now, circling back to something I said later on and something of a correction, worm support is indeed in Terramaster TOS. It was in TOS 5.1, and in TOS 6 they've actually improved a lot of the write once read many features there for enterprise and compliance mode. In other words, for either an admin to be the only one that can make changes, or indeed you can have it so that no one can make any changes whatsoever. And again, all of that is configurable with a fresh volume there. It doesn't go down to the shared folder level. So again, we've got some nice little bells and whistles and quality of life features being rolled in here. Now, when it comes to the apps and services that are either already existing in TOS or those that have been added in TOS 6, there isn't a vast amount of new apps. But the ones that are there are either the ones that are already in beta rolling out of them, or are ones that people have been requesting for quite a long time. So, for example, when I look at the range of apps and services that I've got installed currently, you can see that there's a decent number there. We've got that multimedia server, we've got the Terrasync mentioned earlier, we've got AI photo recognition with Terra Photos there for us to utilize. And again, you've got the people and facial recognition there. We've already done dedicated videos on these tools. I've not set it up on this system yet. On top of that, alongside those apps and services, you've also got their own surveillance application that's going to be able to be utilized. But again, this is still another app that is currently in beta. So for example, when we go into the apps and services there, the Surveillance Manager is beta, Terra Photos is still beta, the Terrasync application is all still beta, and we've already done dedicated videos on the majority of these alongside our setup series for Terramaster NAS in 2024 that is either live now or going to be live very, very soon. Now, some of the apps that are pretty exclusive to TOS 6, probably one of the most early noticeable ones is the new Docker Manager that's being included. There was always support of Portainer as it stood, but now you can take advantage of your new Docker Manager there with access to existing registries in order to access the existing databases. And again, I do recommend making your way over to the Terramaster beta pages. There's a link towards all of the apps and features that have been added, and you can get access to the direct downloads for the container applications there to be utilized. But again, it's nice to have that feature, and it's another just small quality of life improvement that arguably a lot of users have been waiting for a while. And that's really about it. We are still talking about a beta here. We're talking about a TOS update that arguably I really hope Terramaster doesn't plan on releasing until much later in the year. I think it does feel responsive. I think it does definitely improve upon TOS 5 in some good quality of life ways. Some of the storage management, particularly some of the back-end storage management options have been very impressive. And I do like the new file manager, notwithstanding that cloud bolt on that mounting strategy that didn't seem to be as smooth. I like the features and options here. I like the improvements they've now done to the write once read many system there. I like the extra step of evolution over security isolation mode to now integrate these very select and curated security methodology there. I like this side dashboard here that's available on my behest that I can tailor to my needs. I don't really like this top bar. I know it's probably just me, and again, as I say, it feels like Windows 11 meets the latest Mac OS merged together, but taking what I think is one of the weakest qualities of the two and integrating into one. But with improvements in individual apps and services for containers, some of those improved applications which will hopefully come out of it before the end of the year in surveillance, photos and Terrasync, and of course that new multi-site backup tool that's built in. These are all little improvements that I think are bringing TOS forward quite significantly to where Terramaster want it to be. Is it perfect? No. It's a beta and needs to be treated that way. But at least we're seeing innovation, we're seeing improvements by this brand. Arguably considered the value end of the tier when it comes to turnkey NAS solutions, and anything that challenges the big guys, the guys at the top, your Synologies and your QNAP, to me is always going to get a big tick in the plus box. But what do you guys think? Have you tested out the TOS beta? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. We're not going to be comparing this against the existing TOS 5.1 or any other NAS brand until long after this has come out of beta. But for now, I'd really welcome your thoughts. What do you think of this? What do you think of the new TNAS application and its control deck? Is this what you've been looking for? Is this maybe what's going to tip you over the edge towards opting for a Terramaster NAS? Maybe it isn't. Let me know. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.